Yes, please start.
Okay. A very good afternoon to one and all, and welcome to the second day of the 3-day National Virtual Conference on Multidimensional Perspective of Navigating with COVID, organized by Srimati P.N. Doshi Women's College in association with Mumbai University and College Teachers Association. To refresh our memories about day one of the conference, we had two sessions yesterday. One session by Dr. Mridula Ramanna, a noted medical historian. Dr. Ramanna outlined the Bombay experience of 1896 and 1918 pandemic. While she was sharing her interesting experience about the plague and the influence of the pandemic, as listeners, we could draw parallels in our current experiences of pandemic as well. In the second session by Dr. Judy Grace Matthew, an academician, she elaborated the need of online learning and ways of making online teaching interesting for the learner. Today, due to the pandemic, we have been forced to go online. And hence, this is absolutely the need of our now. Now, furthering these deliberations today, we will be navigating through the economic and public health concerns regarding the pandemic. Now, I request our dear principal, Dr. Asha Menon, to formally welcome the gathering. Dr. Menon, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the day 2 of the National Virtual Conference titled Multidimensional Perspective of Navigating with COVID-19, organized by S.P. Doshi Women's College, Mumbai. I would like to welcome two very eminent speakers, Dr. Vibhuti Patel and Dr. Amar Jesani, for the session today. Have you ever wondered why we can't take our eyes and ears off when Vibhuti ma'am is speaking? That's because she has tremendous knowledge in the subject she speaks, and she has the knack of simplifying things by giving a lot of examples and sharing real life stories. Same with Dr. Amar Jesani too, a highly acclaimed writer. The interesting way in which he weaves chapters is testimonial to the books he has published. We couldn't have had better resource persons than the two of them to dwell on economics and public health. So please join me in welcoming the personalities of today, Dr. Vibhuti Patel and Dr. Amar Jesani. I also would like to welcome all the principals participating in this conference and the other participants. It's nice to see all of them in such large numbers. Thank you. Over to Amita.
Thank you, ma'am, for a warm welcome. Now I would request Dr. Subhash Athavale, Mr. Subhash Athavale, Secretary of Mukhta, to say a few words on the occasion.
Thank you very much. I welcome all dear participants from different colleges and universities all over India. I also welcome all my colleagues in this platform, on Zoom platform. I also welcome the resource persons for the day, Dr. Vibhuti and sir. We, as an Mukhta, is a teachers organization, that is Mumbai University and College Teachers Association. It's affiliated to ABRSM, that is Akhil Bharatiya Rashtriya Shaikshik Parishad, which is the central body. We, Mukhta, work on the tagline that Rashtra ke hit mein shiksha, shiksha ke hit mein shikshak, shikshak ke hit mein samaj. One of our co-founder member, Dr. Sumana Rawal, is also there with me today. And we, the team, like Dr. Shekhar Chandratre, Dr. Mange, myself, our own president, Dr. Vaibhav Naravade, have started this initiative in 2008. Now, under the leadership of Dr. Vaibhav Naravade and myself as General Secretary, we have taken further Mukhta and we have formulated a teachers grievance cell and teachers education cell. Both the cells are working very nicely and they are taking up issues, different issues of the teachers, and also educating the teachers from this webinars and organizing lecture series as well. Mukhta have, since the lockdown, after 25th of March, Mukhta has team decided to start up with the webinars and to educate the teachers on different aspects of the education. We have started with the webinar series under the name of Dr. Sri Dattopanta Thengdi, whose birth centenary we all are celebrating. We have conducted 13 webinars under that lecture series, and after that, Team Mukhta decided to extend the support, technical support, to the colleges and the university. This particular event is also outcome of that, and Madam Asha Madam, principal of PN Doshi College, when she said that we wanted your technical assistance, Team Mukhta members were very much ready. I feel very proud to say that on our webinars, around 107 teachers from 107 universities throughout India and abroad have taken benefit. At a single time, at a single given time, more than 3,000 plus teachers used to be online on our network. We have a lot number of issues which are going on. We have also launched a website that is www.mukhta.in, where all our activities are listed. We have also a publication sale where through which we will be coming out with different publications which will be a great help to the teachers community. With this, I welcome you all once again and hand over for the further proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm doing great in the COVID also not stopped and taking new initiatives. I'm really glad that associated with us in this conference. I request Dr. Shobha Bharat to introduce Dr. Vibhuti Patel, the first speaker of the second day.
Thank you so much, Amita. Thank you so much, Amita. I'm really privileged to introduce Professor Vibhuti Patel, a very accomplished and well-known expert. She's currently the professor at Advanced Center for Women's Studies, School of Developmental Studies of Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She has completed her PhD in economics from the University of Mumbai. She was awarded a visiting fellowship for postdoctoral research at the London School of Economics and GB Political Science from the Association of Commonwealth Universities, UK in 92-93. She has authored and co-authored 12 books, edited and co-edited more than 9 books. She has contributed over 100 papers in books edited by other authors, and she has also authored and co-authored 34 monographs, research monographs and reports. Her research, commentaries and reviews have been published in national as well as international journals. She has contributed as a paper coordinator for Women and Economics for MA Women's Studies course and created many modules for MA in Adult and Continued Extension Education. She has received a number of citations from Mahila Sangha Bunds Association, Men Against Violation and Abuse, Akshara Mumbai for social sector work, from the Mayor of Mumbai Municipal Corporation. She has also received the Outstanding Citizenship Award, the Times of India Foundation Award for Women Achievers. She is on the editorial board of a number of international journals of economics, education and development. She's also contributed to Mumbai Human Development Report and MMRDA Human Development Report, and contributed as an expert on socio-economic status of Muslims in Maharashtra for the government of Maharashtra in 2013. Thank you very much, ma'am. We are really privileged to have you on board. Dr. Vibhuti Patel can now take over. Ma'am.
Ma'am, you'll have to unmute.
Fine. Am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, you're audible. We can't see the screen, but
yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Now, screen is.
Yes, ma'am.
You can see the screen. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Kumdavalli, Dr. Asha Menon, Dr. Shobha Bharat, and Dr. Amita Tendulkar, for having me here. I also thank Mr. Subhash Atavale of Mukhta for giving me this opportunity to make a presentation on economic impact of COVID-19. I think the lot has been written about the human miseries or the health issues and the kind of problems with the migrant communities faced, but macro analysis of economic impact of COVID-19 is happening now recently. So let us now understand the 4 phases of lockdown 1.0, which started from 25th of March up to 14th April. The lockdown 2 period, that was from 15th April to 3rd May. Third phase of lockdown was from 4th May to 17th May. And now currently we are in the 4th phase of lockdown with 18th May from 18th May to 31st May. And this has happened mainly because of the pandemic. And it's not only in India, but it's globally, a lot of countries have been affected and they are impacted greatly, and a lot of calamities have taken place because of this pandemic. Now, yesterday, I think Dr. Mrudula Ramana gave a very, very, very vivid description of how the combating of epidemics has happened. There is a strong documentation of economic history of public health, whether it was a combating smallpox or plague or tuberculosis, and also as late as in 1994. In Surat also we had a plague, and how the system, both the civil society and the state, they cooperated to create, to combat plague and also come up with a new, very strong public health measures. In fact, anybody who has been to Surat before plague and after plague, you can see that the kind of consciousness which the city planners and the citizens in Surat have after that experience. So when it comes to this pandemic, the impact on economy has been great, and also in the society and governance structures have been completely shaken because of this massive health disaster that we had. It did not come from India; it came from elsewhere. Okay, and yesterday there was a lot of debate about that also. There are predictions of fiscal deficit of 5 to 6% of GDP, but now economists are saying main thing is to combat COVID, the implications of COVID. We can go right even up to 20% of the GDP. That's what some economists are saying. There is a tremendous staff shortage, as more than 50% of the posts in public health sectors, they have not been filled after 1991 new economic policy which our country adopted, and the budget for public health is less than 2% of GDP, while the United Nations demands that minimum 6% of the GDP, even the sustainable goals of the accepted by the our country also demands that 6% of GDP must be allocated to public health. We have also seen that private sector, the way private sector completely abandoned its social responsibility, and they closed down their nursing homes and clinics. And now state governments after state governments have to issue GR demanding responsibility from the public sector, private sector doctors, because they have also got their degree because of the taxpayers' income. Medical colleges are run by the state. So neoliberal logic in health services and charging of the user fee is not going to work, not only in India, but even in the industrialized countries. There is a strong demand of public health services need to be strengthened. And I think many of the Western countries and even African and Latin American countries, they have also come in a big way to put the role of public health facilities and public health services center stage. In the rural areas, you have seen that the loss in the Rabi crop due to breakdown of the supply chain, because in the month of March, like Rabi crops were ready. And even in rural areas, we have seen during lockdown phase 1, 2, and 3, there have been reported cases of starvation because MG Narega had to be stopped, and a lot of people who were daily wage earners and agricultural laborers, even marginal farmers, they had to suffer. Even when the crop was ready, the supply chain was affected, and that's why they had to suffer. Another thing which we have noticed in last 60 days, is also adaptability of the corrupt forces. And I would not say that corrupt forces are there only in public sector or private sector. We have had enough evidences. If you read, I read more than 25 newspapers, not read, but scan more than 25 newspapers a day, which I get on PDF on my WhatsApp in Gujarati, Hindi, Marathi, and English. The reported cases of rent-seeking behavior of the doctors, both in public sector, where they would demand like 10,000 rupees for death certificate, right just near in my ward only. I have heard so many horror stories. And private hospitals and practitioners, where the migrant workers, they even for a 2-line certificate, they would demand 4,000 rupees to 2,500 to 4,000 rupees just to give a certificate saying that they are physically fit to leave Maharashtra or to leave Mumbai. No. So we have seen that. We have seen how the police or the ward officers or hospital staff, ration shop owners, there are big scams every day. Newspapers are reporting about ration shop owners siphoning of PDS quota and selling it at a very, very unreasonably high rate. Like in the first phase of lockdown last week of March, even in my area, kerosene was sold for 45 rupees per liter, and none of the watchmen or this thing, they could not buy. Then it was the people in the residential houses who were giving them thali, who were giving them food. We have seen the same thing in grocers. With the grocers also, they have taken advantage. The things which would be usually selling for 40 rupees, they would sell for 78 rupees and all. And we have also seen in the private sector transport services, where our students from TISs, when they had to go from Devna to Varda, they had to pay 25,000 rupees for a taxi, or many people who wanted to come from Aurangabad to Mumbai, they were asking for 12,000 rupees by taxi service. So even the private and truck drivers, there are n number of horror stories over last 10 days, how the truck drivers have been fleecing people. There have been reported cases of even sexual violence against women migrants in the Marathi, Gujarati, and Hindi newspapers. So we have seen this is the way like social and economic life of the people have been affected. Now, we need to understand that the states which are making major contribution to the economy. Okay, if we go by the CRISIL study, the contribution of the top 8 pandemic hit states, which are Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, and Telangana. Now, in that, these are the states which are contributing to 65% of manufacturing output, 60% of construction output, 33% of service output, and even in terms of the workforce, the workforce is very, very strategically and crucially located in the economic ladder. So the sectoral profile of the effect of lockdown, if we see, manufacturing sector has been hit very hard. It is in the urban centers, nearly in most of the Indian metropolitan cities, around 40%. Bombay has even more, 54% of the population living in the slums, where they can't maintain physical distancing. I would not use the term social distancing, because as Baba Saheb Ambedkar has said, that social distancing came because of the caste system, whole concept of purity and pollution. I would just say body distancing or physical distancing. And now I think WHO has also come up with a poster this week about they have also changed the nomenclature and they call it body distancing and physical distancing. So that is not possible. So the workers in the urban areas, they also were hit very hard, and even in the first phase of lockdown only, because as in yesterday's interview in Indian Express, Minister of Labour said that 90% of the Indian workforce is in the unorganized sector. Out of like around 46 crore workers we have in India, 90% are in unorganized sector. In these unorganized sectors, they lost their job. Many of them did not receive their salary for the month of March and April, and now even May. And that created tremendous calamity so far as those migrant workers were concerned. Service sector, like whether it is a platform-based service sector or a gig economy and other services which are whether it is a medical services, educational services, all this they suffered a lot due to lockdown. Travel and tourism is completely ruined in last 2 months. A gig economy, also platform-based economy, Urban Clap or Swiggy or Ola or Uber, which boast of having nearly 80 lakhs workers, they also suffered. And these are the workers who are educated. Now, many of them have gone back to Jharkhand. I just got the report day before yesterday that the workers, young workers who have gone back to Jharkhand, they are educated, they are 12th pass, and they were in the cities, they were either working for Swiggy or Ola or Uber, or they were having treated as a skilled workers. Now they have gone back to their respective states and they are asked to work on MG Narega. In fact, there is a demand, 3 times more demand for the MG Narega job, and the kind of work which they were given, which is called, and they are listed as an unskilled worker, and they rebelled. They said, no, we are not unskilled workers. No, so that identity crisis has also come. Another very important sector which has suffered is e-commerce because of the lockdown situation. Their activities, and it's a very big employer. Over last 10 years, the young persons employed under e-commerce have been huge. Nearing to 1 crore. Loss of micro enterprises, that was a major hit, and I think even in the relief package which the Prime Minister's office, Honorable Prime Minister announced, I think in that also there is a major focus that micro, small and medium industries, they have suffered a lot because of lockdown. Household services, they are also been affected, whether it was services in terms of a care industry that has suffered, and household-based production. There are so many tier 2, tier 3 cities where the production process and the whole production units, if you go to Surat, you would see whether they are jerry workers or ready-made garment workers or sari makers, all of these are all household industries, and they have suffered. Sales have also suffered because most of the malls and shopping places and bazaars and markets had to be closed. And World Bank has estimated that COVID-19 pandemic will push 16 million people in our country into extreme poverty. And the relief package of 20 lakh crore declared by Finance Minister on 17th of May amounts to 10% of GDP, mainly directed for the stimulus to the micro, small and medium industries. Now, the question of migrant workers, and which Jan Bremen, the Dutch scholar, calls them footloose labor. Now, they were the most vulnerable, and according to ILO, it amounts to 92% of the workforce, and most of them happen to be scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. Some are OBC. Of all religions, I would not say one particular religion, but a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and Buddhist, they are there. As per 2011 census, the Indian economy had 14 crore migrant workers, interstate and cross-country migrant workers, out of which 24% are women, and about which not much is said, either in the official discourse nor in the media. Women are, so they are always shown mainly as the wives of the migrant workers, but they are also on account migrant workers. And as per the ILO, like there are more, 120, like that is 12 crore workers are in the informal sector, and 25% of them are in the they happen to be women. So lockdown 1, the first phase of lockdown resulted in a loss of livelihood and no income. So many of them were abandoned by the contractors. Employers would not answer their phone calls. In fact, the 85% that the yesterday's study by Indian Social Studies Trust in Delhi has come out with the 6 researches. They are called rapid research. So rapid research, last 60 days, what has happened in the Indian economy, and they said 85% of the domestic workers have not been paid by their employers for the salary of March, April, and now we are at the May end. So you can imagine the predicament of all these women. So non-payment of back wages also, because March and April wages have also not come. No money to pay rent of the house or the bills for water, food, and electricity. And the lucky ones, like the shelter camps were started, I think by within 15 days of lockdown, the shelter camps were started. And first time, like vilification of NGO is not done by the state. State and non-state actors are working in collaboration. NGOs like in Mumbai, if you see, most of the NGOs are working in collaboration with Mumbai Municipal Corporation, the state government. So civil community-based organizations, NGOs, and also neighborhood civil society organizations which has sprung up in response to the pandemic. They are addressing the issue of irregular supply of food or a dirty, filthy, overflowing toilets in the bastis. That is one of the major reasons where people don't want to live in that environment. And the most important, loss of dignity, because workers, like whether they are workers in the stainless steel company or the workers in MIDC, workers in construction industry, all of them say that they had never faced food insecurity in their life. They are the skilled workers. Their wage rates were between 300 to 700, carpenters and plumbers and fitters and wiremen and electrician and all. And they standing in a queue for the food or for like waiting for the relief workers to come and give them packets, that itself violates their dignity. In fact, the relief workers are saying that so many of them don't even come out. They have to go, and because of in the containment zone, even volunteers are not allowed to enter the containment zone. But they feel shy, they feel ashamed. Even those who are most excluded, widows or physically disabled person or transgender, sex worker, they also find it very difficult to take food from unknown people, because they have never done it before. They always had cash. Now they don't have cash. So loss of livelihood, layoff under lockdown, and resultant vulnerability, which has done this thing. And globally, it's not only in India. India, one thing is good, that we have freedom of press. Whatever right or wrong happens in our country is reported. Sometimes even and with pictures and with videos and with extremely heart-wrenching and very, very, very in a very, very vivid description that we get of the human miseries. While in other countries where there is no freedom of press, where there is a dictatorship, where there is a multi-party system is not there, nothing comes out. It is not that 190 countries which are suffering because of COVID pandemic, they don't have problems. They also have as grave problems as India has, but not much is reported. It's only people who happen to be there and who happen to meet you. Some journalist sends you your journalist friend or academic friend or some diplomat who knows you personally. They tell you the story on your phone, and then you get to know. But in India, one thing good is that all this thing has been reported, and that's why we are able to even address the crisis in a much faster way. The moment you get the video clipping from your friend in Virar that people are leaving en masse, hundreds of people are just walking on Western Express Highway, social work institutions like College of Social Work and TISS and all, they mobilize forces and they say, please read Western Express Highway with food and stapple and shoes and drinking water and sandwiches. So this is possible when there is a freedom of press, and which I would say, and that's why in economic analysis, we need to think beyond market is not an equalizer. Market accentuates human miseries at the time of crisis. Already existing inequalities get exacerbated because of the blind forces of market work. We also need the democratic institutions, in which India has, and that's and globally, like if you see Thomas Piketty's study recently, which has come up this week, and he says that financial capital is worse than COVID, as it destroys human society in a horrific pursuit of profit. And I think this it resonates what the people in Dharavi or the migrant workers who are leaving when they say that COVID se pehle hum bhook se mar jayenge. We will die of hunger first than COVID, before the COVID attacks us. So the whole atmosphere of distress, despair, and death, and increase in people's dependence on food packets. I think that is the major calamity that we have faced. Now, at one level, social scientists, human rights organizations, NGOs, human rights organizations, they accept migrant workers as a builder of modern India. So that acknowledgement is there. In the 60s and 70s, any problem that happened in the city, we would attribute it to the migrants. Lawlessness, dirt, filth, theft, attack on senior citizen. Now that discourse has shifted. We accept the role, and I think that has come up in the chief minister's speeches of chief ministers after chief ministers, whether it's a chief minister of Andhra Pradesh, chief minister of Tamil Nadu, chief minister of Kerala, and chief minister of Jharkhand. all of them have been acknowledging that migrant workers play a very important role in building the state. They constitute a very key demography in the Indian workforce, and those have been very, very important. But these are the workers during COVID pandemic are facing a situation from fire to frying pan. And reverse migration, which has also drastic impact on the sectoral growth of the example, like everyone in Maharashtra, for example, 75,000 industrial units, small and medium micro, small and medium units. And current exodus of migrant workers in the cities, they have also affected transport sector in a big way, like truck drivers have run away. So even when the crop is ready, you have a fruits and vegetables ready in the farm, who will bring them to the cities. So that is that is a major problem we are facing. So the supply chain has been affected for fast moving consumer items, agricultural products due to they have been affected because of the migration of all the truck drivers and tempo drivers and rickshaw and seasonal migration in India. It's a very important important this thing that during the cultivation season and harvest season, migrant workers go back to the native place, and rest of the time they are in the city. As many of the employers have also given their interview in the Economic Times and Business Standard and other economic journals. So this seasonal migration is that of a nearly 10 million, that means 1 crore workers. They always migrate seasonally. Rabi harvest season, like for the vegetable and fruit production, so you need the workers. There is an urgent need for income support scheme for both rural and urban working people. So even upscaling of MG Narega, and I think now in the Prime Minister's package, now the big amount MG Narega is getting. So that would be and plus how to make MG Narega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme more economically productive. It should not be like a dagad kodaicha, just breaking of a stone. We have to very careful planning in collaboration with the district commissioner, micro planning has to take place, and the Panchayati Raj institutions, all of them, they have to come together, and there should be bottom up budgeting, because budget money is there, money is parked in the MG Narega account, but that money needs to be channelized in a more effective way so that everyone is benefiting. Workers get a job, they get employment, the area gets developed, it gets the physical infrastructure. Currently, it's extremely important, mainly to create the social infrastructure of health centers, containment zones, testing centers. So massive construction to strengthen the public health system in the rural area is also required. Now, all these workers who have gone back to the villages, they are skilled workers. They have multiple skills. So why not? Instead of de-skilling them, why can't we upscale? Why can't we make MG Narega program of more skill oriented, so that we can generate the resources for the this thing? Because we have funds, we have functionaries, and we have functions. So functions have to be very clearly earmarked so that we create a better social and physical infrastructure in the rural and peri-urban areas, which are lacking. There is a tremendous shortage of those health services. In fact, most of these 440 trains, which also had to be diverted, is mainly because of the checking facility. Like before accepting the workers in the territory, you need to have a health checkup. But if there are not enough nurses and doctors and health workers to do that, how can you do it fast? So there are long queues of thousands of people waiting for their health checkup. So I think that is the one lesson that we have got, that we need to strengthen. Incentivization of micro, small and medium enterprises. And in that also, only one state has come up, because I think the Planning Commission, they have a woman economist, gender specialist, Dr. Mridul Lipan, that in these new enterprises, and now we are talking about the Atmanirbharta, that means decentralized development. So all these new units that emerge in different states, we need to convince the state governments to enhance women's employment in MSME sector. Because from 2013, 2013 to 2017, India had a drastic decline of workforce participation from 34% to 27%. And currently we are seeing around 21% women in the workforce. And there is a massive, there is a lot of criticism of India, even in the World Economic Forum, that everywhere work participation of women is increasing. It's only in India, Pakistan, and a couple of Arab countries that work participation has gone down. So I think we need to address this issue. And all this talented, because UGC is boasting about massive introduction, like nearly 25% of total increase in UGC, women in higher education are there. So these are the women who are qualified, and we need to generate employment and absorb them in the employment, in the new employments which will be coming up in a post-COVID arena. Now, the regeneration of self-employment activities is also very important. Like we in the post-independence period, always there was a criticism of Indian agriculture, which was always considered to be laggard and responsible for 3.5% Hindu rate of growth. But first time we are seeing, like during the lockdown, that industrial growth is 0, while the agricultural growth is 11%. Okay, so why not to make this advantageous situation we have in terms of agrarian production? And I think there are predictions that even in the Kharif crop we are going to get good crop. So regenerate self-employment activities in the food production, food processing, food preservation, fruit processing, fish processing. Recently, I think that there are areas in which there is a glut of tomato. Now at least they have tomato processing work they have started, so that it doesn't get destroyed. Now, the chaos created because of the reverse migration, the confusion, loss of confidence, workforce from UP, MP, Bihar, Rajasthan, Orissa, Gujarat, Jharkhand, all of them, when they started going back, what we saw was a lot of barriers in the interstate crossover, resulting in a dangerous route used by the migrant families. Many of them got mowed down by bus, mowed down by truck, train transport. Also, they suffered sexual harassment was faced by women migrants in the and local newspapers have reported about it. Truck drivers leaving the workers in a deep forest, like that. 4 days back, the tragedy, the truck driver started from Bhiwandi in Thane in Mumbai and left the workers in forest in Satna, and for 48 hours workers were stranded there. The truck driver had run away, and these workers had only mobile number of Ghar Bachao, Ghar Banao Andolan, and they rang up. And then after massive phone calls to district officers and NGOs and civil society organizations and various ministers, finally they were picked up from Satna. They were given food and water, and then they were taken to the border of Madhya Pradesh. So this kind of confusion has also taken place. So more interaction between different decision makers in different states, more interaction between center and state becomes very important. An official record of the Supreme Court of India, which was revealed, like when the public interest litigation was filed about the migrant workers' problems and how the state needs to take the responsibility of their relocation. The official data that was given to the Supreme Court of India on the at the end of the April 2020 was that 15 lakh migrant workers were on road in April. I'm talking about 3 weeks back. They were walking on railway tracks. They were walking on highways. Many of them have used even forest route, about which we don't even have data. There are no newspaper reports about what happened to those who use the forest routes and all. When they use bicycle, auto rickshaw, tempo in the truck. We have those pictures we have seen. 60 to 80 persons were stuffed in one truck or a bus, train, large vessels, cement mixers. Industrial vessels also have been used by these workers. So hunger and thirst and death due to starvation, dehydration, and suffocation due to overcrowding is one issue. Another thing about the reproductive health needs of pregnant women, roadside delivery, maternal deaths, deliveries of babies in a Shramik Express. 23 women have delivered babies in a Shramik Express over the last 2 weeks. Problems of the senior citizens, young one carrying them on their back, or the children falling ill, persons with disability, the problems of robbery, extortion, theft, sexual violence, child sexual abuse. In fact, the child line is saying that they have started getting distress call, 10 times more distress calls on from the children. So suicide, panic, road accident, train accident, trafficking of women and children, I think these have been very, very highly documented. And this has also brought focus that in our economic analysis, we need to take into consideration unpaid care work of migrant men and women, because whether it is in confinement zone, whether it is in bastis, where you have to cook for the 12,000 people in the camps, shelter camps which are created by the cities, everywhere, I think that the role that they have played is very important, and that's we just can't. This also we have to take into cognizance. Just because there is no monetary transaction, we can't say that they have not. They have done a very, very important economic role of sustaining the workforce through their intervention. Now, coming to the healthcare budget and healthcare services, India has a 9 lakh public health workers. Over 90% of the public health workers are women. Either they are doctor or nurse or ayabais or education workers. They have played, and here is the play. We need massive budgetary allocation. Migrant workers who are in the informal sector of the economy, like we have seen that the informal employment, whether it is a part-time work or contract work, unregistered work, home-based work, we need to have a very strong data. And I think the Labour Minister of India today, he said that yes, they are going to provide, because unless you have a visibility of nature of the work done by the migrant workers, and also gender disaggregated data, age disaggregated data, how many young workers are there, how many middle-aged workers are there, how many are senior citizens, how many are men, how many are women. We need to have this data so that we can come up with the human resource planning, which can contribute in a great way to the economy. Now, the most excluded and the most vulnerable section of the economy in this pandemic have been women-headed households. That means where the households which are managed by widow, single, divorced, parityakta, that means deserted women, and women who are facing long-term male migration. Men are away for 8 months, 10 months, 1 year, like that. People with disability, senior citizens and lonely elderly, pregnant women, homeless women, socially stigmatized women, stigmatized persons like a transgender community or sex workers, we need to take them into consideration in our economic planning. Prisoners and inmates who are overcrowded in shelter homes and makeshift shelters, I think they need, and workers, daily wage laborers, head loaders, construction workers, street vendors, domestic workers, security guards, small scale producers, people in the recycling industry, scrap and garment industries. Recently, we saw a massive exodus of goldsmiths from Mira Road, or we are jerry workers from Bengal who are going back. So I think these are the lucrative industries. These are the industries for which India has a competitive edge. Even pharmaceutical industry, nearly 282 countries in the world, India is providing the medicines, and that too very affordable medicines, because transnational corporation and multinational corporation, they charge bomb, while the Indian medicines are affordable. Cash transfer of 500 rupees in a Janadan account. The evaluation by Delbach study, the database provided by Delbach study shows that 70% had not received that amount till mid-April. And now I think scenario must have been better. So life on move, after lockdown 4.0, that means in the current phase of lockdown, we saw trains started going, but in terms of the people who wanted to relocate and the facilities which the state could provide, we saw there was a big gap, and we saw that there was a life on move. But after all these troubles, like at the end of the journey also, so many of the migrant communities, they faced social stigma at their destination place. So that is there. Now here comes, and I think today is also in the discussion with the Labour Minister that has been discussed, that what about the Interstate Migration Workmen's Act, which we had earlier, and it was revised in 1979, and currently we have 4 labor codes on industrial, so labor code on wages, labor code about that has been passed, labor code on occupational health and safety. It is there in the parliament. We have a labor code about the labor standards, and now industrial relations. So they are there. So this Interstate Migration Workmen Act is completely ineffective because employers subvert the act by leaving hire and fire activity to the contractors and who don't maintain any records or register, whether even when the state is employer. For example, in a case of say building of Asiad Stadium or building of Commonwealth Games, all those massive construction that took place before Commonwealth Games, where the state was employer, even in that case, these contractors did not give any, whether it was a PF or whether opening of the account or whether it was their health benefits, nothing were given to the workers. So I think we need to have a very strong Interstate Migration Act. And I think some state governments have said that they are now going to keep a record and UID will be created for the migrant workers, and interstate migration will be more regulated and state will take responsibility. It will not be left to the market. So no mention of now the major criticism of these labor codes is that nowhere in the labor code there is a mention of women workers, and especially women workers' needs regarding maternity benefits or reproductive health need or sexual safety of women at workplace. These things are not taken care of. Now, these are the multifaceted challenges which the migrant workers face, but still we should place in record because otherwise another historian like our Dr. Murdula Ramanna, they would say she will also be, he or she will be analyzing what happened during COVID pandemic. So I think some of the best practices of the state governments like care and concern and compassion, which is shown, responsible media coverage, except for very hardly 5% of the media coverage I would call irresponsible, but otherwise largely media has actually portrayed the situation. Dialogue of the elected representatives with the people, I think chief ministers picking up mobile when some MLA or MP from Jharkhand or MP or Rajasthan rings up, I think it's a great thing. Even it communicates that you respect them as human beings. The speeches, I have been listening to the speeches of Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Chief Minister of Andhra, Chief Minister of Kerala, and the respect which they are talking about. At least they have shown the political will that they would they would look after the workers and they will not compromise the interest of the workers. And the human face has emerged in this pandemic. At least on paper you see it. In reality, I think there may be some gap because it's such a big calamity that has happened. Shelter with utmost care of hygiene, like I visited a shelter in Warsaw, and I found the shelter home for 1,200 migrant workers, which had 30 toilets. There were separate toilets for women at the other end, around 10 of them. Everything was provided. Separate meal was provided to the pregnant women. And this thing, so this kind of care, when the NGOs and GOs work together, I think it becomes very important because the personal touch, the human touch that comes. Universalization of PDS without conditionality of eligibility criteria and domicile, principally accepted by all state governments, and even center has also accepted that now we will not ask for any identification or other, but food security, everyone should get food. That principally accepted. List of beneficiaries to be prepared by collector's office. I think it's now very easy with so many therapy, permanent account number and a yellow card and BPL card, and we have a Aadhaar. So now it's not difficult to prepare the beneficiary list, okay? Because if NGOs, tiny little NGOs can prepare beneficiary list of their region, I think for the state it's not difficult. Water tanks and mobile toilets also, they were very important in a big way because when lakhs of people are moving from one place to other place, I think this thing become very important in terms of sanitation and the civic governance. Health post of government organizations and private sector is now made to provide healthcare facilities. I think when Gujarat has now given the GR, Maharashtra was the first one. First was the Kerala way back in January, asked the private sectors either to provide the services or give it to the state to use it. Special focus on reproductive and child health. Now it has emerged. State commissions for women and National Commission for Women have come up. Helpline for counseling services for children, for survivor of violence, and for the senior citizens, they have come. Safe repatriation to the rural homes by synchronized interstate travel. It's very important. The tragedy that took place where so many buses had reached the border of one state and they were not allowed in. I think that this kind of thing should not happen. As it is, to organize buses, it takes 15 days of labor. The kind of paperwork that you have to do for health checkup, clearance from district collector, clearance from municipal authority, clearance from employer. There's a lot of effort goes in relocation. And after that, when they reach the destination and that they are not allowed, as happened in case of the border of UP and Delhi, I think this should not happen. Payment of all areas to the workers by the employers, I think state has to make it. We are always talking about disciplining the workers, but I think there is a time to discipline the employers also, and many Asian states have done it. Okay, that at the time of calamity, everyone has to take responsibility, and unless we do that, there will be scenario of desperation, feeling of ruthlessness, and panic after abandonment of employer and contractor, and many of them would get stranded midway. NGOs, CBOs, and CSOs, I think they have played extremely crucial role, and I think there is a acknowledgement of that by the CEO of Niti Aayog, acknowledgement by the government, many elected representatives, and they have also because they believe that migrant workers are hardworking city makers. City makers is a term which is now very much discussed. They are the ones who build this, who are there in the construction industry, who are there in the manufacturing sector, who are there in the production and services and transport. So they are the backbone of the urban economy. And I quote the slogan of Ghar Bachao, Ghar Banao. Migrant workers are hardworking city makers. They are the backbone of urban economy. And that's why we see that so many men and women volunteers, whether they are from IIT Mumbai or they are from Mumbai University or SNDT or IIT or TISS, the Nimra Niketan, or also College of Social Work in Mumbai, and I think elsewhere also, we have seen that they have transcended coronaphobia. The places where nobody would go, neither the bureaucrats nor the elected representatives, these young boys and girls, they have entered those confinement zones, and they are running. They are not only providing the relief kits with all the dignity and care, but they are also running those community kitchens in a total democratic way, where the people who are staying there, or they decide what kind of menu and food they want to cook. Now, coming to the agrarian sector under COVID-19, I think it's very, at the time of lockdown, when the 25th of March, India was already in the middle of Rabi harvesting season, when the standing crops, they had to be processed and sold. Government of Maharashtra gave a notification, I think by 14th of April, notification was given that all the post-harvesting activities and operations and all the essential services for agriculture sector would be resumed, and farmers were also allowed to take their products directly to the consumer without any harassment at the nakas. So that was a very good move, and that also was helpful, because if you go to the centralized market like APMC, there is and we also found that there is a possibility of infection, but the farmers taking their tempo and going to the housing society and respecting the rules of physical distancing, it can even solve the problem of infection. Now, over 1.31 lakh migrant sugarcane workers, they have been allowed to return to their native villages amid lockdown, subject to carrying out medical tests in connection with the coronavirus outbreak. And in Maharashtra being the largest supplier of sugar, and I think role of sugarcane workers is extremely, and it's a seasonal migration. It is an intrastate migration. People from one district of Maharashtra moving to other district. So we have seen that lockdown has also created, because so many of them had to go back, they lost their wages, especially the agricultural workers and marginal farmers, they suffered a lot. And starvation in the rural areas, which was not much reported. Okay, because we were focusing so much on the urban calamities. Then I think slowly and gradually the news started percolating about the starvation in rural areas and exponential increase in the demand for the MG-Narega activities. And even in the rural areas, food had to be provided by the voluntary organizations. And the impact of COVID in the rural areas in terms of work, in terms of wages, in terms of food security, and in terms of the health needs, because in any case, the public primary healthcare centers or the civil hospitals, they are highly inadequate to respond to the enormity of the crisis that was created due to COVID pandemic. Now, some of the best practices that has emerged in these last 2 months in terms of communication, in terms of dialogue of the politicians with the people, in terms of use of the technology in a big way. In fact, the way WhatsApp and Facebook, even the semi-literate or even women domestic workers or the migrant workers, they have managed to reach out to people because they had the mobile. So all may not have, they want to have a smartphone, but at least they have mobile. So I think technology, relief resources, and many young workers also have smartphone where they were sharing pictures, they were sharing videos of what was happening in the area where nobody had reached. No, so even those who were cut off from the civil society governance, they also could reach out. Relief and resources, and also appropriate policy. Now, appropriate economic policy is very important. And the human rights organizations all over the world and in India, they are focusing, and I think in the next lecture by Dr. Amar Jesani, it will come. So I'm not going in a big detail, but one thing that I would say that we need to have a separate labor helpline. We have a helpline for women in survivor of violence. We have a helpline for senior citizens. We have a helpline for children in distress. We don't have any helpline, and this helpline, they have to be in regional language. Okay, if there are workers from Bengal, workers who speak Bengali, Hindi, Marathi, Malayalam, Tamil, and Gujarati, we need to have those helplines in regional languages. And I think even institutions like TISS or various helplines run by, say, SNDT or Nirnaniketan can have multilingual helpline. Why can't the state have? So that is important. Now, another distressing thing which has emerged, and I think it was shared by Thomas Piketty this week only, the inequality, the rise in the inequality there is a comparison of 5 countries: India, United States, Russia, China, and Europe, and which shows that from 1980 to 2015, the inequality in India, I think, is the highest as compared to any other country. And that's why our economic measures, our macroeconomic policies, our meso measures and micro level work interventions, they have to be, we need to review the macroeconomic policies based on market fundamentalism and neoliberalism. We need to encourage equitable sharing of domestic tasks and also allow the compensation of all the workers. We need to give them. Then state must ensure increased access to sanitation and also more space to the unhoused people. That means we have to come up with the urban housing. I think till 1977, I can say urban housing was a top priority of the state. In so many urban centers, low-income group quarters, LIG quarters, they had been created, and they were very, very subsidized. And I think now with this migration crisis, we saw, I think we need to, in a smart city, the current obsession of smart city about only technological upgradation and surveillance mechanism and CCTV cameras and just construction of flyovers and shopping malls and car park, I think we need to get out of that mode. And we also must think about the workforce, the backbone of the economy, whether they have a basic minimum needs for a dignified survival. I think is very important. And had these migrant workers were not been thrown out by their because they could not pay their rent, they would not have left Mumbai, because so many of them, even when they missed the train, today's papers are saying that nearly 4,000 of them whose trains are cancelled, they have no other alternative but just to be under the tree, because all the money they have exhausted and their ghar malik and their landlords have thrown them out. So this should not happen. So I think state must step in a big way. And I think I have seen in so many African countries, even in Philippines, you go to countries poorer than us in Asia and Africa, I think they have taken care of this when the urbanization took place. So we need to allocate more budget and government expenditure on urban housing has to increase. It should also implement the protocol and train the authorities how to engage with the vulnerable population. I think the strong middle class bias, strong class bias which came out during this crisis management, I think we need to sensitize this people with power about how to be more human and more caring about the poor people. Consultation of the government bodies with the civil society organizations are a must. It has happened during this 60 days. In spite of lockdown, there are enough and number of Zoom meetings, WebEx meetings, Skype calls, and various WhatsApp is also now it's allowed 6 people to be on in is taking place. I think this legacy must continue. We should not distrust each other, whether you are state actor or non-state actor. We should work together, and access to information, public health education, and resources in multiple languages, whether the information should be provided. Another thing that we must change our mindset and about that economy is closed. Don't say just because it is lockdown, economy is not closed. Everyone is cooking, cleaning, taking care of their loved ones. It is not just valued by the economist because it is unpaid work. So I think our attitude towards unpaid work also needs to be changed. Now, challenge posed by the political rhetoric of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan under lockdown 4, and also the economic policy of liberalization and privatization, about which also I told. I think what we need to do is a fiscal widening. After prolonged lockdown, the stress on the, say, demand side is also very important, because supply side is now resumed to a certain extent because the industries have started functioning, though there is a labor shortage. But demand chain is also broken, because people have no money to purchase. Okay, so strengthen the rural infrastructure and strengthen the urban cash in hand of the people. In rural areas, you can do it through MG Narega. In the urban areas, through more and more employment, and also emergency cash transfer that has to be done. Relook at the new public sector enterprise policy, where the public sector enterprises and government entities which should not be sold out. We have seen that it is at the time of lockdown, it is only the public health system, and whatever with limitations it had, whatever inadequate resources, human resources or money it had, it only stood by the community. Okay, the private sector did not. None of them. All these Fortune 500 companies, which are always at the forefront when there is a marathon or where there is IPL, where are they? I see only volunteers of the community-based organizations or social work institutions in the field. They are not there in the field. Okay. They may have contributed to Prime Minister's Fund and Chief Minister's Fund, but they are not there for the hand-holding even of their own employee. So I think it's very important that we learn to value the contribution made by the public sector. Increase in the aggregate demand by cash in hand for consumption to the poverty groups is important. Investment in MSMEs that will increase demand for the intermediate good, that's also very important, and that has come up in the government package also, the package by the Prime Minister. Honorable Prime Minister. Digital transformation of MSME services, because so many things in a supply chain, like virtual offices, supply chain also can be, we can use the digital technology. Work from home and remote work for IT enabled work, I think that is coming in a big way, both officially and also at the enterprise level that is happening. So meeting the challenges posed by category 4, like a super cyclone Amphan, like in Orissa and Bengal, that is also, I think, going to affect the Indian economy in a big way. So the major lessons of the COVID crisis has been a massive need for urban housing. In a smart, when we talk about the smart city, we also need to talk about the sustainable city. And for that, I think it's a very smart city budget, which is an extremely whoopingly high budget. I think it should think about the urban poor. Community-based organizations like Ghar Bachao, Ghar Banao, or National Slum Dwellers Federation, or Indian Workers Alliance, or Right to Food Campaign, National Campaign for Housing Rights, in a different cities, they must be capacitated so that they can also contribute for the effective area planning. Social work institution can be entrusted with the task of preparing a need assessment and the city specific action plan. Transparent municipal performance audit based on quantitative and qualitative parameters. I would not say that just we need numbers and percentages. We also need the qualitative dimension. We also need the case studies. It should be made mandatory for the local self-government bodies. And the safety of personal protection equipment. I think now MSMEs have started manufacturing personal protection equipment for the frontline workers. And here, when we talk about frontline workers, they are not only health workers, they are sanitation workers, they are bank employees, but all of them who have continued working during the essential services during the lockdown. I think they all are frontline workers. Water and sanitation departments, they have to say they don't disconnect the supply if people are not able to pay the reconnection fee. Once again, like labor helplines are very, very important, where all the information regarding wage denial or layoff or termination or discrimination, brutality, sudden and forceful eviction, all these things can be redressed and can be attended to. Arrangement of safe and free of charge return of all migrant workers. I think now it is principally accepted by all the state governments. Wages and cash transfer, direct support, cash support to safeguard the workers' interest. And workers already have existing debt, and how to do the handholding. State has to do the handholding. And policy recommendations, they are more or less the same. Like during and after lifting the lockdown also, I think we will have to continue universalization of income support scheme for the informal sector worker in the poverty groups. And this is the global demand, not only in India, but all the developing countries are demanding that. And this whole question of a fiscal deficit, like only the cap on state governments that they can't have more than 3% fiscal deficit is going to be very, very difficult to manage, because state governments are at the front. They are the ones who are managing the health crisis. And that's why I think it's very important. We can also, we need to use the blockchain technology to ensure universal basic income. And last, I would like to say that along with the human rights organizations, the state needs to adopt human rights oriented protocols with regard to people in prison, administrative migration center, quarantine center, confinement camps, and people with disabilities in the institutions and psychiatric facilities who are at high risk of COVID-19 contagion due to confinement conditions. So I think along with the economic agenda, we also need to further human rights agenda. My presentation is based on, because the things are happening so fast that I think that scanning of newspaper, we can take it with pinch of salt, but I think it's very important. I've also gone through this thing, and some of the scholarly articles that I have referred to, I have given in the reference list. And I think this COVID pandemic is not impossible to handle. It is mission possible. And I think yesterday, Dr. Mudra Ramana's economic history of plague also said that when concerted efforts are made, we can achieve. And I think that is the commitment India has also given under the Sustainable Development Goal. And we need to have one is blockchain income support, and also state and civil society. They have to work together, and that should be freedom and justice are the central axis around which all our economic and political actions need to take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vibhuti Patel. And ending it on a very positive note, because everybody is worried about what's going to happen to the economy post-COVID. You've elaborated beautifully the problems of the workers, the marginalized sector, the vulnerable population, as well as you've analyzed in your presentation the government schemes and also showing a way ahead. So, and also touching upon the gender and social perspective. So it's giving a kind of a holistic outlook to the whole economic problems that we are facing and how we're going to deal with these problems.
Thank you very much.
If you have any questions, If you have any questions for Dr. Vibhuti Patel, I request the attendees to post on the Telegram group. We will take a question post the second session. So if you have any questions for Dr. Vibhuti Patel and the next speaker, you can post them on the Telegram group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As well as the feedback forms will be posted on the Telegram group. Kindly fill them. Moving on further in the day, it's my proud privilege to introduce a remarkable person. Going through his biodata itself was a learning experience for me. The speaker of the second session today, Dr. Amar Jesani, is an independent consultant, researcher, and a teacher in bioethics and public health. A prolific career spanning over 4 decades, his work in the field of bioethics deals with the ethical issues in healthcare, medicine, research, biotechnology, and the environment. He's been the founder member of research institutes like Forum for Ethics Society and Anusandhan Trust. The primary objectives of these institutes was to focus attention on the ethical norms and practices in healthcare in India through research, education, and training. Sir has coordinated the formulation of ethical guidelines for social science research in an era when ethics in the field of social science was less prominent. He has been an adjunct faculty as well as a visiting professor for several short courses in research bioethics at many prestigious institutes in India as well as abroad. Apart from being a member of Research Ethics Committee in Biomedical Science and Public Health Institutes in India, he is Ethics Committee member of Medicine Sans, which is an international humanitarian NGO. Dr. Jesani has completed more than 20 research and training projects in public health and bioethics and has co-authored and co-edited 9 books. Presently, he is on the editorial board of Indian Journal of Ethics. He is involved in the nationwide platform Medico Friend Circle and Jan Swasthya Abhiyan, with our secular, pluralist, pro-people, pro-poor platforms for health practitioners, scientists, and social activists. With his expertise and experience in the field of community health, I'm sure his talk will give us a nuanced understanding of public health, safety, and governance concerns in the present scenario. Dr. Jesani, can you hear me? Welcome, sir.
I think sir needs to unmute himself.
Yeah. Sir? Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, fine. Thanks a lot for inviting me here. All the organizers, the way they are organizing virtual conferencing and webinars and all the lectures has really made our lockdown period somewhat productive. So it's very useful to have this.
Absolutely.
See, I'm asked to speak about, let me share my PowerPoint so that you know what I'm doing. Come on. Yeah, is it coming?
Yes, it is coming.
So we can see it, yes.
Right. My topic is on looking at public health, safety, and the governance. I was quite wondering because talking about public health after more than 2 months public health crisis has been very, very difficult because almost everybody knows about public health now. You know, this first time perhaps in the history of India that the newspaper, all the commentaries, everything is about the public health. So I was wondering where to focus my my presentation. And what I have done is is not to go too deep into the data, which you must be reading all the time, but to try to have more focus on larger governance issues. Because Vibhuti Patel, who spoke earlier, she has given you a lot of information and data about the consequences of what has happened in last more than 2 months. This is journal we publish, which has a section on COVID-19. If anybody is interested, it's an open access journal. It's free to publish. It's a multidisciplinary journal. It's there for last 8 years now. And it deals with both public health, bioethics, research ethics, clinical ethics. So you'll find a larger focus where the doctors as well as non-doctors come together to debate the issues. And one of the issues that we have been debating for quite some time now is the COVID-19. So that may be very, very useful. So when we talk about public health, the first thing that comes in our mind is public, isn't it? Because a person cannot be called expert in public health without knowing about the public, about the people of India. So the first question is that do we really know the people of India? And the policies that we have taken so far in response to the threat of the virus, is it with a deeper understanding of our people, or is or we have not really applied our understanding of the people while designing our strategy? So keep in mind that we have one hand, there is a virus which has come, it is spreading, it is posing health hazard for large number of people. On the other hand, as a society, we are responding to it. We want to fight it, we want to curb it, we want to ensure that less number of people get affected. Now, in order to respond to an epidemic threat, we have to know our society very well. And that's where what Professor Vibhuti Patel was describing, we seem to be failing. That why did we took up policies where we forgot about what was the condition of people and try to implement those policies in such a manner that there are more number of people suffering than there should have been. So I think it's very, very important. I was just reading today's newspaper saying that, well, who is informing our government today in order to design strategies? I thought it was always, there must be the public health expert of India. But the more and more news coming out saying that the task force of public health that was formed before the crisis started in middle of March was never consulted before taking decisions. Somebody else, some other people are seem to be being consulted. These are the, where the members of the task force have spoken to the journalists saying that we were never consulted, although we were there and they could have done. So it's very important that people you consult are really rooted in Indian reality, who are doing public health work, soiling their hands for last several decades and learned about the people in order to design the strategy that will be the most suitable. And if you design strategy without taking them in, and you do it by keeping, say, as it was reported today, that the health ministry is being advised by the Boston Consulting Group, an American one, So this is our Atmanirbhar, where we are consulting somebody from the US in order to design our strategy. And people like, Professor Mulyal or Srinath Reddy or people like Sundaraman and all, who are well-known public health experts, or T. Jacob Jan and other people, they all seem to have got marginalized. So there is one important thing that we need to learn is that our response should come from the understanding of the people, and it must take into consideration the condition in which people live. Let me go tell you that what are the major issues that I will be taking up. One is looking at 1918 pandemic that has been talked about Professor Mudula. So I think I'll just take off from there. Then talk about when you take governance issues, why governance requires certain kind of ethical framework. Because in the pandemic, we do restrict people's liberties. And when you restrict people's liberty, you have certain corresponding obligations. Are we really keeping our obligation or not? Then come to some of the principles and guidelines which are internationally recognized, where India is signatory. The Syracuse Principles of 1984, which looks at the human rights aspect of it. You have ethical aspect which comes from the WHO. So I'll just briefly go through it, and then take a few specific issues which you may be interested. Is the frontline workers, issue of confidentiality of information, issue of scarcity of resources, and how to ensure that they are properly distributed, and then care of the vulnerables and research in the pandemic. We may not have enough time for the research in the pandemic, but the rest of the issues I will try to cover as well as possible. Now, I don't think most of you need the definition of what is epidemic. That is, where a large number of cases of disease occurs, or injuries, or health condition, and which is expected to increase, and in a particular period of time in certain communities, then we talk about a disease being epidemic. Pandemic is the place, is something where more than one country is involved, and there is a possibility of the larger international spread of it. So, most important part in the communicable diseases is that how this communicable disease is going to spread from one person to another. So effective reproduction number is very, very important. That if one person gets infected, how many persons that person will be infecting, because of the droplet infection, where cough and other thing, in the air droplets is taking to the other places. Or suppose you have an epidemic of say, diarrhea, and in diarrhea you may have water which is causing it. And so the causative agents, which is because of the person who is contaminating it, is if it is going to the larger number of people, then it's a very contagious disease. And the first thing that we have to do is to reduce the transmission. So this is how in COVID case, the first most important part has been how do we reduce transmission, because we don't have any remedy, either a vaccine or a drug to against this virus. So I think that is where large number of public health strategies are concentrated on. There is a research going on to produce vaccine. There is a research going on to see that people can be treated when they are infected, but that is still going to take time. Now let us look at the coronavirus and compare it with 1918 influenza, because both of them were influenza. So what you find is that COVID-19 pandemic, we have at the time, this time we have a population about 8 billion people in the world. And what is the 6 million people are infected out of them. So although we feel that it's a huge problem, it is only affecting 0.08% of the population. If we just look at number of deaths, 0.5 million of deaths, and it's a very, very small quantity as compared to the influenza pandemic of 2018, which had a massive impact. You'll find that world population was 1.5 billion, 500 million people got infected, and 50 million people died. The death rate ran among the infected 3.3%. So it was very, very infectious and very, very, it was causing a lot of mortality. You may have heard about Ebola, which occurred in the Western Africa, where the mortality rate was very high, 40 to 60% of the people who got infected dying. So it's as compared to that, the current COVID-19 is not causing as many mortality. But there are certain sections of the people where the mortality is very, very high. So if you look at the age distribution of people, you'll find that in 1918, the large number of people who died were young people, 20 to 40 people, years of age. And you look at 2020, you'll find that nearly half of the people who have died so far, they are more than 70% age. And large number of them living in the nursing home or old age care homes, where the infection spread very fast, and all of them were vulnerable and having a lot of comorbidities. And so death was very quick in those places. There are accusations against the government saying that many governments did not provide enough protection to the old people, and they allowed them to die because they wanted to protect the rest of the population much better. That's how they did not have enough protection, say, in the nursing homes and all. They did not have enough healthcare also made available there. So there are those kind of allegations that you'll find from place to place. Many places, they got infected before government became aware of it, So this is an evolving epidemic. People had not anticipated many things, and so there is a possibility that people were not aware. But like say other countries where where the infection went later on, they should have learned from it and try to provide protection to these people. Now, why do we need in managing or in the governance of the response to this kind of pandemic, some kind of ethical framework? As I said earlier, that the number of this kind of epidemic and pandemics are increasing. You must have heard about Zika virus, which started from Brazil, which is that you have avian flu, the blood flu, the swine flu, number of flus that have come in last 10 years and or 15 years, and they have really created havoc. None of them have created as big havoc as COVID-19, but still they are very important. They have been happening in the sense that there are viruses which are in the animal kingdom, and they are getting mutated and they are coming to the human being, and that is a larger ecological issue. I won't go into that, but it is very important area that the new viruses are coming from different sources. And then you had also had Ebola. Ebola also came from the animal source, but it was restricted, fortunately, in the West Africa, and it did not go to the other countries. But still, it is always possible that if new epidemic comes and the drug is not effective, the Ebola can also really affect a larger population. I was talking to some epidemiologists, and I said that, well, you are very senior and perhaps you might have seen a lot of epidemics. So you will have a huge insight into this epidemic, scientific insight. So what he said is and I think he wrote also that in his article, is that when you have seen one epidemic, you have seen only one epidemic. You don't know what is going to happen in the next epidemic. Because if the causative agent changes, it's a genetic structure changes, mutation happens. The flu has been taking place all the time. Every year it is coming and it is taking toll of our old people. But we have not been able to, have a long-lasting vaccine simply because every time it comes, it is having a different genetic structure. So, it's a very difficult area where scientists are constantly learning. So they say that as we get the feel of the epidemic, we continuously learn about it. So we have to be very careful about how the science we design. And when that kind of uncertainty is there, it becomes very important that your concern for the ethics are also heightened. Otherwise, you may be making a lot of mistakes. And so controlling the infection is the most important part of the intervention that you have, and that brings about the policies, the response of the society, and the response of the society says that, well, for the sake of majority, larger community, we must restrict individuals' rights. You have to stay home. You cannot do certain kind of stuff. Now, in the earlier lecture, Vibhuti was talking about human rights issue. And if you tell people to restrict their rights simply because you have to protect the larger society, ensure that there is less infection spread, then there has to be corresponding obligations of the people who are actually introducing this policy. A public way of restricting individuals' rights is not for the purpose of repression of the people, but is for the purpose of caring of the people. So you have violence in the society and you have a curfew. what you are trying to do is trying to repress the people who are violent and trying to see that everything becomes normal. When you are having an infection, people are at the risk of catching infection. And if you are restricting people's rights at the time through lockdown, you are not imposing a curfew. You are not being harsh with the people. Actually, you have to be more caring for the people, simply because your idea is not to repress them, but to empower them, to make them understand and to see that what state is doing is actually in their interests. So there are two different ways of putting public health. Public health does in such situation recommend some amount of restriction of individual civil liberties, but it is more in a paternalistic way. A paternalistic way does reduce, but at the same time, it is also caring. And this care is important. If it is not there, then most of the things will not work. And I think that is where what happened in last 2 months, where we are going wrong. So therefore, restriction is accompanied by obligation. In fact, the higher the restriction, the greater the obligation to fully care for the well-being and sustenance of people's livelihood. I was just reading an article written by Advocate Mihir Desai recently, 2 days back. It came on the portal. And Mihir Desai argues very, very clearly. He says that if you are restricting one part of fundamental right, then the rest of the fundamental rights become actually more pronounced. And the state has a more obligation to fulfill those fundamental rights. That means if you restrict my capacity to earn money to feed myself, then you have to give me feeding. You have to provide me food. You have to provide me support. If you don't do it, then restricting my freedom is an unjust manner, is an unethical one. So that is a very strong argument here that if you are restricting, then you must ensure that you are also having certain obligations, and those obligations are fulfilled. Here are the two documents which I will run through very fast. One is Syracuse Principles, which was brought together by the International Commission of Jurists in 1984. It was based on this kind of epidemics over several decades, and they saw that the states were becoming repressive without discharging their ethical obligation. Even in the democracies, it is happening, where in ours is a democracy. And why this crisis like migrant crisis should have happened if we were very conscious about the human rights. The Syracuse Principles were worked out on the basis of that. And then in 2016, the WHO came out with a very good guidance on managing the ethical issue. So this is the 8 major principles of the Syracuse. They are very important. And if you want to evaluate lockdown in India, then if you apply these 8 principles and try to see what each aspect of the lockdown fulfill in terms of this principle, then you may have a very balanced account of it. Not a biased account, but very scientific balanced account. So the first thing was that, was there a scientific basis for imposing restrictions? Should we have done the lockdown at the point we did? And was the lockdown ever required? But there are scientists who were arguing that perhaps we don't require imposition of restrictions at all. You have an example which is debated internationally, is Sweden. Sweden said that we are not going to have lockdown at all. They said schools will continue, let young people go and work in the offices, let them interact with each other. Why? They said, well, data shows, science shows that young people do get infected, but they don't die. Many of them remain without symptoms and don't suffer. So if they get infected, there is no problem. They'll develop immunity, and that immunity will actually protect if it is in large amount. If 60% of the people in the society get infected in that manner and they don't die and they survive, then you have herd immunity, and that herd immunity will protect the rest of the society also. So they have been doing it, but they failed in protecting their all people. and the nursing home and other places. So it seems the mortality at the moment is high, but in long term, it may be very, very different. Secondly, non-COVID cases, they were able to handle much better because they kept the society open. While in India and the many other places, while their health system is geared to COVID, but all the non-COVID people who are suffering, because when COVID is around, doesn't mean that cancer is disappeared, doesn't mean that the maternal care has to disappear. Your malaria is not going to disappear, your TB is not going to disappear. They all are there and they require care. But if you paralyze the entire stuff and don't provide care there, then there will be extra deaths in those areas. So where perhaps at the end of the year, you will know that was Sweden right in doing what it has done. But you have to have a scientific basis for the imposing restriction. The science includes the information about the people. Should you have imposed a lockdown in 4 hours notice, or should you have given people 4 days or 5 days or 7 days to go back wherever they wanted to go? Certain countries gave them time. Singapore gave, Korea never had it, the Singapore did it. Other countries also have 5 to 7 days time to the people to reorganize themselves so that once the lockdown starts, they will not suffer from the kind of economic hardship that you saw here today. So it's another area, that should there have been time given to them. If these migrant workers were shifted to their villages earlier in March, should they have carried as much of infection as they are carrying today? No, they wouldn't have, because there were very few infections at that time. Shifting them at that time would have been much, much better than shifting them now, because now they are carrying COVID into the villages also. So, the problem is that if you are not scientific in the way you do it, then you may create more problem than solving the problem. Secondly, is that the restrictions you have, you must be as less restrictive as possible. If you have more restrictive one, then you must have a reason for doing it. I think that is an issue that is going to come up from 1st of June. That should you have restrictions all over the country, or you are going to relax it in different places. Consideration of the cost and logistic, I won't go into it. It's a very obvious that Vibhuti has been describing the economic costs and all kind of stuff. Carrying out imposing restriction itself has a certain cost in that. And ensuring human condition, you cannot have restriction without giving the human condition to the people. I think the earlier speaker has covered it. I said that, well, restrictions were imposed very, very diligently, but provision of the human condition, addressing the financial and social consequences and all, were not given enough consideration, and that led to a major humanitarian crisis in India. Sixth one is very, very important, and this has also come after Indian emergency in mid-70s. The due process protection never stops. If somebody is misusing the restriction to score political points against other people, to arrest them under flimsy charges, to harass people, I think then there should be a good grievance redress available. This is an international law. And I think that is where we seem to be failing, because our judiciary is putting a lot of faith in executive, saying that, well, you decide whatever you want to do and you come back. And as a consequence, people are not being heard. And that is leading to a lot of dissatisfaction, saying that this is not the right way of going. We suppose that a person doesn't get admission in a hospital. Today, what is happening is that we keep getting a lot of WhatsApp saying that, can you help? Individually, you have to go around and contact the hospitals to find a bed for that person. Why can't they have a public grievance system where somebody is not getting bed? A doctor who has got, say, COVID positive is not getting a bed, and the doctor does not know where to turn to, And these are the issues which should have been taken care of when restrictions are imposed. It should be equitable, application. I remember when this crisis started, some people said that, well, virus is not going to differentiate between people, but that is not true. And Vibhuti Patel's presentation show that different people get differently affected. What is happening today is that the middle class people who are having good housing, they are getting protected well. And all the poor people, that means more than half of the Bombay's population, is completely exposed because they don't have good housing where they can have physical distancing. So what is happening is that this application of lockdown is affecting people in a different manner. So those people who are exposed, they are getting infected, while the people who are from the middle class, who actually brought the infection in India, they are getting protected. And the communication to convince people that why restrictions are there and why they should on their own accept this restriction are very, very important. And that they will do it, provided the state is able to discharge its ethical obligation, like, human condition, financial and social consequences are taken care of, and that kind of stuff. If that is not done, and if it is only one way, saying that, yes, you will be restricted, but you will not be given anything, then the things will break down. I think that is where the communications are very, very important. Anyway, so coming to the health workers, where I am a doctor, so I keep getting a lot of stuff on this. And you know that it's not only doctors who are involved in this. There's a diverse range of people, starting from health professionals to paraprofessionals to sanitary workers, crematorium, graveyard workers. You just name them. You can also talk about the police force, which is going on the road and trying to, when they become repressive, we don't like. But at the same time, they are quite prone to getting infection because they have to go from basti to basti. There are aid workers, there are NGO workers who are doing good job, charitable work. They are also at a big, big risk of getting infection, right? So why are they there? Do they have really ethical obligation? Can you make a doctor to go and work for the COVID? Or you said, well, it should be based on your voluntary understanding. If you are altruistic, go and risk your life. Now here, WHO is very, very clear. Its framework says very clearly that it is a part of your code of ethics. You cannot be forced, but at the same time, you will be doing it well, provided there is a reciprocal responsibility taken to protect the health workers who are going and working in the hospitals and other places. So it's very, very important that it is they have to be taken care of. They have to be provided PPE, that is personal protective equipments which are required. They should be provided tools. They should be provided appropriate remuneration. This is again a major problem. Many doctors complain, many nurses complain, many other people complain that when they are fighting on the corona, they don't get paid the salary. The salary is being offered to new doctors and the health workers who are being invited to join is very, very low. And so people are really dissatisfied there. So if health workers get infection, should they have priority access to healthcare? This is a part of reciprocity. That if somebody does something for you, taking a risk to the life, they should be provided certain priority access. I think those are the ethical norms in the governance of the health system, which are very, very important, and they should be implemented. The other part, many of you know, and some of you might have suffered from, is how do you keep information confidential and yet ensure that people who are getting infected are isolated, quarantined, and they don't infect others. I think at the beginning of the lockdown, there were many attempts made where the names of the people were publicized. There were boards being put up in front of the house saying that these people are corona positive. And every epidemic where there is no treatment available brings along with it stigmatization. So people who really suffer, they are made more to suffer more by the stigmatization and being made to feel shame in the society. So this is a very, very important area where you have to ensure that there is a personal, that data confidentiality ensured. Because if you don't do it, people will hide that they are having COVID. If they hide, it is worst. Because they hide it, they spread it more. People don't hide it and yet at the same time don't be shamed by the society. They are going to be more disciplined and ensure that they don't infect the others. If you do it other way around as it was being done, then it may lead to more spreading of the infection. And if you say that everybody should do something, then there has to be a very, very strong justification. And there also should be a guarantee that the information that is collected from people will not be shared with the private parties and will not be misused. And this is all kind of apps that we are supposed to keep on our phone and make all our personal information available. I think that is where it is very, very important. Unfortunately, our country do not have a data protection law. And without having data protection law and a system in place, if you start sharing all this thing, it can create a huge amount of problem. Right? There are a lot of biological specimens which are being collected as a part of our fight against corona. And if confidentiality is not maintained, there will be a big problem of stigmatization and all. There are also issues like this sample lying with the health authority and being privately used by the pharmaceutical companies and others in order to develop something which may have profit benefits there without people who have supplied anything getting something out of it. So it's very, very important that those specimens are kept confidential. At the same time, when they are used for research, they should ensure that the outcome of the research is for the society and not for the private benefit. Coming to the last couple of issues quickly, because otherwise there won't be time for the questions, is that one is hospitals. We have a long decades. How many decades? I can't just count. 50 years, 60 years when we have started, giving more and more support to the private health sector, and also, privatize some of our health resources. As Professor Vibhuti Patel was telling us in the earlier, that normally when this kind of crisis comes, it is the public health which has to bear all the brunt. Today, I meet a lot of, talk to a lot of, patients who are from the middle class, and suddenly they are put in the KM hospital and they call up or Sion hospital and say, well, condition here is very bad. Oh, yeah, it is bad. It was bad earlier also, but we never knew because middle class had completely abandoned the public healthcare system. And so if you don't have, majority of the hospital beds are in the private sector. In Mumbai, you will say that 30% are in private sector, 20% in the public sector. So with the private sector dominating and number of doctors working in private sector, more than 90%, less than 10% work in the public sector. And you want this public sector to take care of this massive crisis. That's really a problem. It cannot be. It will get over in no time. And it will have a lot of problems simply because the good quality will not be there. And the private sector, instead of saying that, yes, this is a crisis and we will not do profit making. No, they won't say that. That's the major problem. For them, it is a business and business continues. That's how when the COVID testing, they wanted to set up pricing. And what price is the setup? 4,500 rupees for one test for that. And yesterday only, ICMR came out saying that this upper cap that we have put it, we are removing it because state have even negotiated prices at a lower level. And what we find is that this test does not cost more than 1,000 to 1,200 rupees. And still, it was being charged at a very, very high level. Now, if this kind of things are there, and if you are facing a crisis of our existence, shouldn't we have a very strong policy and so that we will take over? And this is what is happening, I think, at least in Bombay and Maharashtra, where the Maharashtra government is saying 80% of the hospital beds will be controlled by the state. But that's not sufficient, even because control means what? You require a really good centralized authority to see that the response of the hospital is highly coordinated. Otherwise, people will be going from one hospital to another without finding the right kind of bed they require. It's also an issue of kind of the equipments which are there in the hospital. So we have to bring healthcare system, public, private, and others under one governance system, uniform quality, and without barriers to access. And barriers to access can go only if you say that, well, it will be available at free of cost to everybody. You are rich, you are poor, all of them will get, because this is the crisis for the humanity of the entire country. And we have to respond together. Anyway, so it's very, very important area. And I guess take the last point, which is about triage, that who gets what equipments. I think it's very, very important. Among health workers, I get a complaint all the time that who gets the priority. Doctors get priority. But within doctors, senior doctors get more priority, and the junior doctor gets less priority. The nurses complain that, well, we are made to work without PPE. The sanitation workers said, how are you going to really allocate your resources at the micro level is important. If you have less number of ventilators, who will get and who will not get? Do you think that all people should not be given ventilator because their chances of survival are less? Or you just say that any patient who comes, the judgment should be made by a person who is and whether the person will be able to survive or not. And on the basis of that, the allocation should be made. So these are the ethical issues, I think, the aspects of the governance that must be there in order to ensure that our response to this epidemic and pandemic is more organized, is more systematic. It is not like knee-jerk and a very panicky reaction, but it is a reaction which we have to sustain for a long time to come till we have either vaccine or a medicine to cure it, or this virus itself goes through a change and burns out. It's a genetic makeup changes. And it burns out. I think we have to, that way, ensure our governance system is kept well. 31st May is not the end of the story. It may be also a beginning of the story. We don't know. We don't have immediate, information which says that, well, things are going to improve or it is going to be so bad. Anything can happen. So we have to be prepared, and we have to be having in place a more systematic approach rather than the way we have been doing so far. Thank you very much. If you have a question, I'll be available here.
Thank you, Dr. Jesani, for a lucid and a very clinical and a thought-provoking session. Yes, this economics and public health is so close to our heart that we have a lot of questions for both Dr. Vibhuti Patel and Dr. Jesani. I request Dr. Aarti Verma to take over the question and answer session. Over to you, Dr. Aarti Verma.
Good evening, one and all. Myself, Aarti Verma, is here to moderate question answer session. My question is to the first speaker, Madam Vibhuti Patel. The question is from Mr. Satwinder Singh. He is asked, hello.
Hey, you are audible, go ahead.
Yeah. So a package of 20 lakh crore announced recently by Indian government to boost the economy. Does it seem feasible from your point of view? Is it favoring supply side rather than demand side?
So should I answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So I think the package, that's what the economists are saying, that if we really want to meet the challenges which are posed by the humanitarian crisis, we need even more, like around they are saying not even 20, it should be 80. And we should not be so scared about the deficit budget because at the time of crisis, budget deficit is not a major problem. The major problem is saving human lives. Okay, that is the priority. Now, and then they said the focus is very much on the supply side because MSMEs, micro, small and medium industries, how to rejuvenate them. The migrant workers who have gone back to their respective states and are planning not to come back. I see that 30% will come back. 30% will stay there. Plus, the kind of humanitarian crisis has also shaken the politicians in the state governments. Okay, all these 8 states from where migrant workers have come, they are also thinking of starting industries. So they need not come to the metropolis. No, they will also develop there. So that approach is also emerging. And they say that if the state governments, they will use their own resources, they will get the centralized schemes and centrally sponsored schemes and give the matching grant and also start industrialization within their own states. So that is one this thing. But main thing is that people have incurred debt in last 65 days. They don't have money in hand. Many of them have gone back to their villages without anything. They are famished, they are malnourished, they are hungry. They have not gone this time with gifts, which generally the migrant workers, when they go back to their native place, they have a lot of goodies to take back for their relatives. They don't have. It is in this condition that cash in hand is very important. So the demand side has to be looked after so that you generate purchasing power. Even if your MSMEs, if they produce goods and people have no money to buy, what are you going to do? No, so that is why it is all the economists, not only in India, everywhere in all developing countries, they are saying that you need to have give cash in hand to the people. So I think Janadana is the one, that 500 rupees emergency fund, which they did the RTGS to the account of BPL population, but now they are saying 3,500. So different state governments have come up with different schemes. But I think demand side has to be very seriously looked after. Yeah.
The second question is from Mr. Kishore. Do you think we fail to combat COVID-19 due to lack of statistics of migrant workers?
Yeah. Not only statistics, but also registration process. It's statistics is also a problem because there are so many. NSS gives one data, Niti Aayog gives another, ILO has a different. But generally, fairly there is acceptance that we have around 46 crore migrant population. If we say intrastate, interstate, and cross-country migration workforce, within that we have 8 crore migrant workers. That is Government of India data. ILO says we have 12 crore migrant workers. That is there. But main thing is that Interstate Migration Act, it's a complete failure because it talks about registration, grievance redressal, all the social protection. But everything is in the hand of contractor. So employer is not taking the responsibility. It's the contract system, and the contractors are the major violator. They don't maintain any record. And this is so now the record keeping about the migrant workers, that see the way we are doing, like once we acknowledge that there is a trafficking of human persons, okay, trafficking of women, trafficking of children. Now, so many states where you have trafficking is taking place, they have now started making, there is a special bureau just to look after how many people are leaving the state, how many, and they are trafficked, and what kind of work they are doing, they are maintaining. So if we do it, now it's not difficult because we already have Aadhaar. We already have EPL card, and we already have IT-enabled services by which we can make it. Even sectoral profile of migrant worker is possible. How many carpenters, how many electricians, how many plumber, how many fitter, how many construction workers, all that now it is very easy to do it. And I think now even the Labour Ministry is also very seriously thinking about it.
Now, next question is from Dr. Madhumita Madam. Work from home has increased due to this COVID situation. Will this continue in post-COVID period too?
Yeah, it will continue. It had also started from before pre-lockdown period also. We can see, we used to see during floods, during monsoon, immediately, whether it was in Hyderabad or Bangalore or Mumbai, people used to get, people in the IT industry used to get WhatsApp message, work from home. Another thing is that in the urban centers, the prices of the premises is so high. Once you have we also know so many of our IT professionals, they are working from home. Those who have come back from abroad, they are working from home. And that's how those multinational and transnational companies are saving money on watchman service, on peon, on office assistants, on rent. So I think to even hire a common space in places like BKC is so expensive, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs is just a rent. So I think even before lockdown also it was happening in IT enabled services. And now once India is moving very much, and everybody has, for past 3-4 years, everyone is talking about Industry 4.0, which is heavily dependent on artificial intelligence and robots. So except for the manufacturing sector or a care industry where you need actual human beings, I think in so many services, it's going to be online. Even teaching, education is going to be heavily online based, or platform based. So that's going to be in a big way. And in fact, Knowledge Commission has already said India needs 15,000 universities, while we have around 500 to 700. Even if we consider the private universities, there is a tremendous scarcity of universities, and especially in the context of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, because all those children who joined Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan 12 years back, they have finished their HSC. They are aspiring, they are knocking at the door of university system, but we don't have that much of space. So I think online platforms are going to be very, very, and work for home is also going, in the several service industries, it's going to be a new norm. Even MSMEs will have to go for a lot of this big platform-based work.
There are many questions for you, madam, but this is the last question which I'm going to take up. How do you see the center-state conflict emerging, especially in state like Kerala? How it is going to affect the state economies and the advantages gained by effective work taken up by such states?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, the question is from Dr. Meera, Institute of Development Studies, Mysore.
Yeah. So I think the center state, it's very, very important, and there is a lot of moral pressure globally also and within the country that pandemic is a major challenge we have, and we should, our political differences, if should be become subsidiary to this thing, and that's why center and state should work in coordination, and especially this whole thing about the relief package, in that you should not discriminate. State like Kerala, I think it has basically used basically the very strong public economics, but only utilizing its own resources. 40% of the state budget of Kerala directly goes for social sector. So that means safe drinking water, public education, universalization of midday meal, universalization of PDS. If you are rich and if you don't want to buy ration grain, that is a different issue. But state is providing that. But I think Kerala is not, in terms of state domestic product, Kerala is not a rich country, rich state. Rich states are Gujarat, Maharashtra, Punjab, Haryana and all. But even the state which doesn't have a very high GDP, SGDP, is doing so well in Kerala, and mainly because of the human face to it. Because the policy which Kerala said that intensive detection and isolation of infected people, while the rest of the economy should not be paralyzed. So that was the approach which Kerala had used it. But currently Kerala also needs a lot of support from the center. So both the central schemes are 100% by the center, and centrally sponsored scheme where you have, according to the economic condition of the state, you decide whether 70% is from the center and 30% from the state, or 40-60, 50-50, that you can decide. But I think all states need to be looked after.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. You have cleared the doubts of our participants in a very lucid manner. Thank you very much. Over to Dr. Amar sir. Question is from Kishore Bhadushali. Private medical practitioners are running away from their responsibilities. What about their medical ethics?
Well, I think this is a typical problem that we have. Vibhuti was earlier in her presentation was talking about plague in Surat. I remember that time, mid 90s, and Dr. Ghanshyam Shah wrote a book on it. And one of the things that happened that the doctors were the first to come to know about that the infection was plague, and they were first to run away from city. But those who ran away were all private practitioners. The public doctors did not go. And I think that is where the problem is, that if you become in the private sector entrepreneur rather than being a professional doctor, then your business takes precedence over the medical ethics. So you are no longer a real health professional, but you become a businessman. And I think that is what has happened. And as a consequence, many have not come out. But what is good part, if I can tell you that in the 2 months lockdown, while initially most of the private doctors did not come out, but gradually they have started going there. And there are also number of examples that I can give where the private doctors have volunteered to go and work there. So it is not completely lost cause, I can tell you. If there is a proper incentive, if there is a proper encouragement, then you can still get them back to work for the community. But that requires a different kind of approach. And the state should be providing much better support in terms of, say, having protective equipment, in terms of better quality of working conditions and that kind of stuff. And you may be able to win over most of them back. Yeah.
Next question, sir. Do you think Indian government has failed in making proper strategy to deal with public health issues since independence? Strategies adopted by other countries do not fit in Indian context. Should government learn some lessons from this pandemic?
Well, the obvious answer is yes. That we did start very well. Actually, if you look at our history, and then we lost the way. At the time of independence, we had some of the pioneering work that came out. There was a Bhore Committee report, which talked about building the health system, both public health as well as the public healthcare system. Public health is normally in the preventive care and promotive care, while the healthcare is about the curative care or clinical care. They wanted to integrate them together and create a system where there was universal access. They said that there should not be any barrier to accessing the healthcare. Their major, slogan was that healthcare should be available to everybody, irrespective of their capacity to pay. That means universal access to healthcare. This was a very, very important principle on which we started in 1946. And then we have independence. We had a first 5-year plan also talks about it. But by the time we came to mid-60s, we lost the way. We did not invest enough. And that is the major problem. Today, our state is, the government, all together, state and the central government together is not investing more than 1.2% of the GDP in the health. So most of us pay from our pockets in order to get the healthcare. This is the worst scenario as compared to any other capitalist middle-level developed economy in the world. On the other hand, large amount of the healthcare is in private sector, and in India it is the least regulated. We have American type of private healthcare system, but not the American type of regulations here. The private healthcare is completely non-regulated. While in US, the same Indian doctor who practices will do huge chunk of paperwork in order to fulfill all the regulations which are there related to quality, related to the price of the care and everything. But in India, well, we don't have. So we are following American model without having a American governance system. But we should be following universal access and not the American type, because with our kind of economy, with a large number of people who are indigent who don't have money to buy healthcare, you require an open system where there is no need to pay at the point of delivery of the service. And it is possible to achieve. There is a good planning for that. Yeah.
Next question, sir. It's in a place like Mumbai, which is overcrowded by people, how to travel by overcrowded train, and how can we carry out our work with after lockdown?
Well, that's what I'm saying, that from the 1st of June, we know how the normalcy is coming back. It is possible that there may be massive surge of infection. And that means, we will have to, once we open the society, we will have a better way of transporting people. That means state will have to invest a big in order to restart the economy, to ensure that the workers are able to go to the place of production, whichever it may be office, it may be white collar job, it may be blue collar job, but you have to ensure that the workers reach there in order to do the production. And that is going to be a big challenge. And it's not about overcrowding, it is about services. Can you create services where crowding is not there? And I think it is the underfunding of the transport system in India, in a metropolis like Bombay. I mean, we started the metro project so late, right? Today, Delhi is much better place as far as transportation is concerned. They also have very high population, but they have much better transportation system established, while Bombay has not done it. It is a financial capital without having a financial control of the capital it is generating in India. So this is a major problem that the city of Bombay is going to face from the 1st of June. And they will have to be very, very careful that the transportation is worked out in a very disciplined manner.
Next, the last question, sir.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on international stigmatization of China, on China?
Well, there was a stigma against China in many, many ways. And world is worried that if China awakens, if it awakens, it is going to be a big economic force. The problem is it is emerging as a big economic force. India also is worried about China, not just about America, but everybody. What I think Professor Vibhuti Patel was talking about was that this COVID as a pandemic may change the economic order at the international level. What does it mean? What it can mean is that those who have been very powerful for last so many decades may get weakened, and those who were less powerful, they may become strong. Now, our Prime Minister has already said that this is an opportunity for India to become powerful in international arena. I'm sure Chinese also believe like that, right? But while we are talking about it, we still don't have things in place. While China has concentrated on education, has concentrated on health, and more importantly, in the education, they have provided skills to the people. And as a consequence, China has really worked on the manufacturing industry. So it is a supplier of manufactured good of the world. What India did, India went for a very elitist industry. Pharmaceutical, yes. IT, yes. BT, yes. Right? Finance, yes. But going and working in an engineering company and soiling your hand and wearing a blue color, a cloth and soiling them, that is not part of us. We are caste conscious people. Because most of our educated people are upper caste. They went for the clean job, and they did not go for the unclean job. China did not do it. China really developed economy in a much better way. So it is going to be a bigger force, and that's how everybody is worried that if China becomes too powerful post-corona, then it will be difficult to contain. And whenever somebody suddenly becomes powerful, there are stigma against that person, because that is the one way of defending ourselves, saying that they are bad people, right? They may not be bad people. They may be as bad as American, or they may be as bad as any other developed country. We have to deal with all of them in a very balanced manner. The worst part any pandemic can do is that make us insecure. Whenever you are insecure, the fake news really go in your mind much faster than the scientific news. Right? So this is what is happening related to stigma. It's not only just stigma against China. It's also stigma against communities within our countries. How much stigma is against, say, migrant workers? How much stigma is against Muslims in India? How much stigma is against, lower caste in India or tribal people in India? And it has become more during the pandemic. It has not decreased. We should actually have seen more brotherhood coming up, more support system and solidarity coming up. That is there, but there are only few honorable exceptions. But the larger thing is that it has more stigmatized our society. So this is same thing is going to happen at international level, and we'll have to deal with it. We have to fight against it. That expression of prejudice, having a slur of that kind. Chinese, what we call Chinese, we call northeastern people the same name. Remember that. That Mongoloid people are also part of India, and they are very much Indian as anybody else. And yet, that stigma is going to get applicable to our own people. So I think prejudice against one is prejudice against everybody. If that is the principle we adopt, then fighting against stigma will be very easy. We can always compete with China in economic terms. We can always compete in any other field, but we don't have to compete with anybody in stigma. That if American is stigmatizing China, will stigmatize more. That is not going to help. It is going to have a very, very bad impact within India too, right? So stigma is something that has to be.
For our pharmaceutical industry, we are dependent on China from raw material, and we have supplied medicines to 80 countries in the world, 82 countries according to WHO. So I think certain things like India has reservation about China, but at the same time, we are entering into trade. PMO office has cleared all the raw material for pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, they can come and occupy our border places, and still we are reacting not as strongly, simply because we have dependence there. So, how politics and economics go together. They are not two separate areas. But, well, who knows, in coming time, it's going to be quite change. So we have to wait and see how the thing will play out. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
One thing I want to ask, Aarti madam, just wait.
Yeah.
One thing I want to ask to Dr. Amar Jassani, sir, it is almost clear that this coronavirus is a genetically modified virus. And in our scientific ethical process, it is said some measures are already standardized. Now, with this vast impact on the globally, is this ethical norms are going to be modified with reference to such kind of the pandemic effect?
Well, I don't think so. First of all, when you say that genetically modify, the nature continuously modifies the genes of various viruses, right? If you look at influenza virus, the influenza that used to affect us last year will not be the same virus affecting us this year. It will be slightly modified. So there's not natural mutation of viruses is there. Now, if you say this was genetically modified in laboratory, then you are talking about conspiracy, right? And I am not the conspiracy theory because I have read.
Laboratory.
Yeah. If you say that, well, it was in the Wuhan laboratory, they modified it, and in order to really cause problem in the world, they did it. Then you will have to come out with much better evidence than what Trump is talking about or many others. There is a strong evidence available that this is also one of the many coronaviruses that came out of the animals. This is animal origin, and when it comes from animal to the human being, it does get genetically modified. If it does not get genetically modified, then it does not actually affect the human beings at all. So in the transmission, genetic modification is very natural. So it has happened here. Now, is it going to change the ethical behavior? On the contrary, what I believe is that at the end of this epidemic, there'll be a lot of reflection by the society, by the healthcare profession, by the public health people to understand where they went wrong, where they violated ethics. Are we as an Indian society going to reflect where we went in the way we implemented lockdown that created humanitarian crisis? So that reflection is ethical reflection to say that next time we'll not make this kind of mistake. So in a big epidemic and pandemic, people do make mistake also. There are genuine mistakes. There are mistakes which are out of negligence. So you'll have to categorize each one and see that wherever there were genuine mistakes are corrected. So yes, ethics will become more pronounced in coming time. Everybody will talk about ethics, which they were not talking earlier. And they will try to see that whatever unethical things that happen, how to change it in after this pandemic is over. So ethics will remain very, very important. Will ethics change? I don't think stigma can ever become ethical. But if stigma becomes ethical, then we have fascism. What happened during Nazi regime, that large number of doctors started believing that certain kinds of people have no right to live. Jews have no right to live. And that's how they did inhuman experiments on them. So ethics change. Those doctors' ethics change. If that kind of change takes place, then what we are going to see in the world is genocide of different kinds. Who will be the victims? I don't know. In different countries, different type of people will be victims if that kind of ethics change comes. But I am very optimistic person. I think the bad things can always be fought by people who are having good heart, and they are in larger number than the people who have bad designs. And I hope after this pandemic, there'll be more and more better understanding that why not to be prejudicial, why to be more caring when you are restricting people's rights. I think that is what is going to happen after this one, and there will be more positive outcome out of this suffering. I think that is a good hope. Otherwise, we all will become pessimists and become completely cynical about anything that is happening around us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your valuable information. Over to Amita, madam.
Thank you, Aarti. So, on a very positive note, we wish that post-COVID crisis, we can come up with these positive reflections on the socio-economic and political systems that we have in our country, and that would make our country a much better place to live in. Thank you so much, Dr. Vibhuti Patel and Dr. Jesani. Before we proceed to the formal vote of thanks, I would like to remind our participants that tomorrow's session would begin at 11 o'clock in the morning. And the feedback forms will be posted on the Telegram group post the session. Over to you, Dr. Shobha Bharat. Thank you.
Thank you, Amita. I would like to propose a vote of thanks. Firstly, to Dr. Vibhuti Patel. I would like to express my sincere appreciation and gratitude for the engrossing lecture on COVID-19, lockdown, and the Indian economy. The session provided insights into the real picture of social and economic lives of people. The misery of the migrant workers due to the pandemic and the dire consequences on the vulnerable population was illustrated very well. Deliberations also included the challenges ahead and the best practices for dealing with COVID. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Amar Jesani for the thought-provoking session, which highlighted the importance of public health in the pandemic, the need for the ethics framework by the government, and the role of governance in caring for the population, and the strategies for dealing to ensure safety of the population. I would also like to express my gratitude to all our trustees and managing committee members for always supporting us in all our endeavors. I would like to also thank Dr. Kundavali, Director, SPRJ Kanyashala Trust, and our dear Principal, Dr. Asha Menon, for their help and minute supervision to achieve their perfection. Sincere appreciation and gratitude to Mr. Subhash Athavale and team Mukhta for their extensive support to provide the technical support to conduct this virtual seminar. A big thank you to all the participants for joining us today. Do join us tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Please note the change in the timings to listen to two more eminent resource persons, Dr. Sovni, a leading psychologist, and Dr. Geeta Chadha for the sociological perspective in dealing with COVID. I would also like to place on record the help that Dr. Vibhuti Patel has extended to us to organize this conference. She has been with us right from the planning stage and provided a lot of help with all the resource persons. Ma'am, really very, very extremely grateful to you. Thank you, ma'am.
Such an excellent organization that you all have done, such meticulous planning. And I'm really thankful to you for this thing. Such a meaningful discussion we had over 3 days.
Yes, ma'am. Today, both the sessions were absolutely fantastic.
Even yesterday, we were on YouTube and we were constantly responding. Right? Brilliant session. Yesterday's session was excellent.
Yes, ma'am. Yesterday's was also wonderful. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jasani.
If you have any queries, you can always contact me on email or phone or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Really
Thank you,
grateful
both
for
of
that.
you.